All right, today we're cracking open one of the biggest cases in the history of science. I'm talking about the mystery of life itself. We've got a lead detective who spent decades hunting for clues, and we're going to follow his trail and see exactly how he solved it.
So here's the big question, the one that's puzzled people for, well, forever. Just look around. From orchids to ostriches, barnacles to butterflies, the sheer variety of life is just staggering, isn't it? Everything seems so perfectly made for its own little world. But how? How did all this incredible diversity happen? For centuries, this was a total mystery.
And this guy? This is our lead investigator, Charles Darwin. Now, he wasn't some loud revolutionary, nope. He was a quiet, super observant naturalist. He was just endlessly curious and absolutely driven to find answers out there in the real world. And he's the one who's going to crack this case wide open.
Okay, so to really get how huge Darwin's idea was, you've got to transport yourself back in time. We have to understand the world he was living in. Because, back in the early 1800s, the official story for why there were so many different animals and plants, well, it was a very different story. Basically, the main idea in England at the time was creationism. And that meant every single species was thought to be its own special, individual creation, fixed, unchanging. The way it was at the beginning of time is the way it is now. That was the established, accepted theory. And that's what our detective was up against.
And this is where the real investigation kicks off. It's 1831, and his super young, 22-year-old Darwin joins the crew of a ship called the HMS Beagle. And get this, at the time, he actually believed in creationism just like everyone else. His job was to be the ship's naturalist, just collecting plants and animals. But this trip, it was going to change his life and, well, pretty much our understanding of everything.
So for the next 5 years, the entire planet became Darwin's crime scene. And he wasn't just some passenger along for the ride. Oh no, he was like this obsessive field agent, constantly gathering evidence, scribbling notes, and just thinking, really thinking about the patterns he started to see.
I mean, this journey was absolutely epic. It took him all the way around the globe. But here's the key thing to remember. Darwin spent most of that time, like 2/3 of it, on land. He was out there trekking through the wilds of South America, exploring the far-flung Galápagos Islands, you name it. And that's where he collected a mind-boggling amount of data.
So, his first big clue literally came out of the ground. In Argentina, Darwin digs up these fossils of a giant armored creature, a Glyptodont. And then, scurrying around in that very same area, he sees living armadillos. And they look just like mini versions of this extinct giant. So the question is, why? Why would this ancient extinct animal and this modern living one look so alike and be found in the exact same spot?
Okay, clue number 2. This one wasn't about the past versus the present. It was about geography. He noticed this weird pattern of replacement. See, Darwin knew about the common rhea, this big ostrich-like bird. But as his ship sailed south along the coast of Argentina, he realized that bird just sort of disappeared. And in its place was a different, smaller species, one we now call Darwin's rhea. They looked super similar, clearly related, but they were definitely different. It was like one species just picked up right where the other one left off.
And then came clue number 3, probably the most famous one of all, from the Galápagos Islands. Here, that same pattern he saw on the mainland was happening, but on a tiny scale, from islands to island. He saw that tortoises on one island had these dome-shaped shells, perfect for eating low-growing plants. But on another island, they had these crazy saddleback shells that let them stretch their necks up to eat cacti. It was so specific. Different islands meant different tortoises, and each one was perfectly adapted for its own little home.
Okay, let's lay out the evidence, just like a detective. You've got extinct animals that look just like the modern ones living in the same spot. You've got similar species swapping places as you travel across a continent. And then you have unique varieties on each little island in a chain. All these clues, they were all pointing in one very radical direction.
And you can just feel how much this was weighing on him in his own words. He knew this was big, really big. This whole idea that species were stable, that they were fixed and never changed, was being totally undermined by what he was seeing with his own eyes. He was cautious, for sure, but he knew he was onto something huge.
And then, boom. Here it is, the I think moment. In a private notebook, Darwin sketches out his solution. And it's not a ladder, with simple stuff on the bottom and humans at the top. No, it's a tree. A branching tree of life, where all these different species split off from common ancestors. That's how you get all this diversity.
He had a name for his theory, descent with modification. It's such a simple, elegant phrase, but the idea behind it is massive. It means all life is related. Every single species is just a modified version of an older one, and that one simple idea, it explained everything. All the clues from his voyage just clicked into place.
Now, Darwin's deduction was absolutely brilliant, but any good detective knows a theory is only as good as the evidence that backs it up, right? So for this last part, let's open up the modern-day evidence locker. We're going to see how his big idea has held up after more than 150 years of testing. And first up, the fossils.
When you look at the fossil record, it tells this incredible story across a scale of time that's just hard to even wrap your head around. And there's a clear order to it. You see simple microbes first. Then, way later, you get bigger, multi-celled animals. Then fish. Then mammals. And then only at the very, very end of the timeline do you see modern humans. This step-by-step progression is exactly what Darwin's idea of descent with modification would lead you to expect.
And it's not like these fossils are just scattered around randomly. Nope. Geologists can read layers of rock like pages in a history book, and the older, deeper layers always have the simpler fossils. The younger layers on top have the more complex ones. I mean, scientists have never, ever found a rabbit fossil down in the dinosaur layers. It just doesn't happen. The order is always the same, which is a huge piece of evidence.
All right, the case gets even stronger when we stop looking at long-dead things and start looking at living creatures. The next set of clues isn't buried in rock, it's hidden inside the bodies of animals walking around today. Okay, think about this for a second. A bat's wing, a mouse's little front leg, and a human arm. They all do totally different things, right? One's for flying, one's for scurrying, one's for grabbing stuff. But if you could peel back the skin, you'd see they're all built from the same basic set of bones. That's what scientists call homology, and it's just incredible evidence that bats, mice, and us humans all inherited that same fundamental blueprint from an ancestor we all share.
And now, for the final piece of the puzzle, the ultimate confirmation. This is evidence that Darwin couldn't have even imagined in his wildest dreams. We're talking about the code of life itself, DNA.
Okay, this right here is the smoking gun. Inside your DNA, you've got your regular working genes, but it's also full of these broken, useless genes called pseudo-genes. They're like ancient genetic fossils. Now, get this. If you look at, say, a horse and a zebra, and you find they have the exact same broken gene in the exact same spot in their DNA, what does that tell you? It can't be because they both need it for living on the savanna. The gene is broken. It doesn't do anything. The only possible explanation is that they both inherited that specific mistake, that exact typo, from a common ancestor who passed it down to both of them. Case closed. There's this famous quote from a geneticist, Theodosius Dobzhansky, that just nails it. He said, "Nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution." And he's right. From the fossils in the ground to the bones in our bodies to the very code in our DNA, every single piece of evidence points back to and strengthens Darwin's big idea. It's what holds all of biology together, explaining everything from the tiniest virus to the biggest wave.
So in the end, Darwin's investigation did way more than just solve a scientific puzzle. It completely changed how we see ourselves. He showed us that every living thing on this planet, every plant, every animal, every tiny microbe, is literally our cousin. We're all just different twigs on the same massive family tree. And while the scientific case might be closed, it leaves us with a much bigger, more personal question to think about. If we're all related, what does that really mean for our place in the world?